Are you ready for rapid fire?
I've done my part of the day, so let's do some rapid fire.
You have. You have. Well, here's what Urban Meyer said about Notre Dame on the Urban's Take with Tim May podcast. Quote, I'm still amazed that Notre Dame's got to go to Wake Forest to get a transfer quarterback. That doesn't equate to me. He's a great player, but Notre Dame's got to go recruit them, a 5-star, and they should have 1, 2, 3 excellent quarterbacks because it's Notre Dame. You should recruit Ohio State, those types of top blue blood teams. You should be in the mix on every top quarterback in America and get them. End quote from Urban Meyer. You buy or sell it?
I first want to Stymie's comment is funny to me. I'm surprised that Urban Meyer still has all of the stage that he has, right? Like it's just kind of funny that like we just kind of overlooked the collapse of the NFL. And I think that's funny, but I think that Urban Meyer does bring up a good point, and I try to remove biasy when thinking about stuff like this in an outside perspective because what Urban Meyer accomplished at Ohio State, and yes, he was a national championship coach at 2 different universities. Like he's got a good track record, and so I would say that this is something that we've largely criticized Notre Dame over too in the past. Is that there should be a better development of elite quarterbacks homegrown. And it shouldn't come down to going to the transfer portal and getting someone like Sam Hartman. And on the flip side of that coin, I think that's what we're hopeful for is that under the new regime of Marcus Freeman, Jared Parker, Gino Guidugli, that process can be accelerated and actually we can see a development. And what Sam Hartman allows is a good quarterback who's like a Band-Aid in a temporary situation, but he also can help spearhead that development because he can teach these younger quarterbacks at the same time while he's playing, right? Like the quarterbacks can see and develop under Sam Hartman, and then hopefully they can hit the ground running. And yeah, like every university would love to have an elite quarterback rotating in after every 2 or 3 years. That's the end goal, and it is a disappointment that Notre Dame really has been lacking in that department ever since kind of Brady Quinn and Jimmy Clausen really.
Look, it's exactly what we've been saying this entire offseason, that if Notre Dame is to is to not just get to college football playoff games, but be competitive in college football playoff games and ultimately have a realistic chance to win a national championship, it's got to start with the quarterback position. We have already, in the last couple of cycles, starting with Kenny Minchie and CJ Carr, seen better quarterback recruiting. And again, we've talked about it here before. You can't go, okay, it's like, okay, we've got the 4. Now we'll take a low end 4 or a high end 3-star type guy. It's got to be, you've got to get as many of the upper echelon, at the very least, high end 4s, borderline 5 type guys. That's where your program is going to differentiate itself. And it's not some big secret that the quarterback recruiting has not been good enough by and large over the last several years at Notre Dame. You've got to go out and you've got to get as many of these guys like he's talking about. And then at some point, if your program's successful and you've got a room full of these guys, someone's probably going to transfer. That's just the way it is. Henry apparently disagrees with me, but I think Henry should be listening to me. I don't know if it's because he lives in Ohio and he just doesn't know any better or what. So disregard the fact that it's Urban Meyer. It actually makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, it's not like other programs aren't out there going after transfer portal quarterbacks either. Lincoln Riley did pretty good when he took that Williams kid with him from Oklahoma to USC. And Nick Saban was fully willing to take Tyler Buchner from Notre Dame for that matter. We're in the transfer portal era. Quarterbacks and other guys are transferring all over the place. But I agree with the sentiment of what he's saying. Get as many of the high-end guys as you've got, fill your room with that, and that's where you need to be. You shouldn't be reaching and settling on quarterbacks. That's what's going to differentiate your program.
And I think all of that is true, but I think often Urban Meyer kind of neglects the kind of privilege that he had at being at Ohio State. I think it's a lot easier to grab up some of, a bountiful of 4 or 5 type wide receivers, quarterbacks, and get them all in the same room because the name of your institution is Ohio State University, right? And And I think that's kind of probably been the most disappointing thing is like Notre Dame is still supposed to be one of those blue blood programs, but their name alone isn't enough to entice a lot of these, big time recruits to kind of all settle on Notre Dame. And I think that's going to be the biggest change in having Marcus Freeman here is he's just more relentless in recruiting.
Yes.
And I think he's going to get he doesn't really take no for an answer, I don't think, and he doesn't make excuses. He just goes out and recruits harder. And then that's going to be the difference maker. And I think a lot of positions other than quarterback in the next few years at Notre Dame.
It feels a little to me like you and I are Cowboys fans, obviously. Our regular listeners know that. When Rod Marinelli was the defensive coordinator with the Dallas Cowboys, a few years back, they famously passed on TJ Watt in the first round, and they took Taco Charlton instead because that's who Rod Marinelli wanted. Rod Marinelli wanted system fit over higher end talent to be in his system. And ultimately, look how things worked out for Rod Marinelli. He got guys to play hard, but they're a lot more talented now that they've got a different approach there. And that's how it feels kind of with the way Brian Kelly / Tommy Rees were doing their recruiting with the quarterback position at Notre Dame. They were going for what they felt was a system fit rather than necessarily the best possible talent they could get to fill that position.
And this goes literally back to a conversation that we had 30 minutes ago of why this is exciting and Notre Dame's going to come out in different personnel this week. Is they're not just trying to make their system fit against the defense. They're allowing, their quote unquote system to kind of expand out and do more things and take advantage of what's being presented against them. And I think that's what the same holds true with these quarterbacks. Like you just brought up, it felt like Brian Kelly had a cookie cutter kind of, for what he wanted his quarterback to be.
Yeah.
And again, his offense wasn't anything overly too complex or too dynamic. And so you didn't have high-end quarterbacks needed for that. I think Brian Kelly's main objective was, and that's what I ultimately, I think that's what's not gotten them over the hump in the past. They just don't have that dynamic quarterback to win you the big games. They'll consistently win you the games that you're supposed to, but they don't win you the big games. And I think that's ultimately what is going to be the difference with Sam Hartman this year is he's going to win the big games, or he's going to give you a better chance at winning those big games.
Georgia could win a national championship with Stetson Bennett at quarterback because they had 5-star guys,
everyone else
all over the
them
defense.
Was good.
That's right. He did it the other way around. Now, again, it's not like Clemson neglected other positions and just went out and got Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence, but they won 2 national championships with those guys and some other good talent sprinkled throughout the roster. But the quarterbacks were what separated them in those national championship seasons at Clemson. And if Notre Dame is able to start getting closer to that level at quarterback, they're going to be a heck of a lot more competitive because they're also getting more, even though they're not getting 5-star guys right now, they're getting more 4-star guys. And that's why you're seeing some of the depth already that we're talking about. They've got more depth now because they've had better hits in the last few recruiting cycles with more 4-star guys, and you're seeing them on the roster right now. All right, Tobias Merriweather, a guy who came up today during Marcus Freeman's Zoom. And, of course, Tobias did not have a catch last week. Here's what Marcus Freeman said about his sophomore wideout.
I think he's been really good in practice, and he's been, to me, dying to have more of a role after last season. And so he's done a great job in the preparation. And you know what? I know he didn't score a touchdown, but he did some really good things in the game. And sometimes the stat sheet doesn't show that. But we were pleased with what he did in the game, and we really look forward to him to have another a great opportunity to have a big game this week.
Marcus Freeman not giving up on Tobias Merriweather. What'd you think of that?
Yeah, and it's one game into the season. And we've talked about this a little bit before. All these wide receivers are going to get their shots. It's just a matter of whether, they're going to catch the ball. And Tobias Merriweather, meaning that Sam Hartman's going to get the ball to him, and it's going to go to whoever is open. There's going to be no forcing the ball. Again, it's whoever's going to be open and whoever's going to be open on that day. It just so happened that that day wasn't Tobias Merriweather's day against Navy, but his day will be coming. And it's good to see that he did other things well outside of just catching the ball, right? Because in a game where you're scoring a lot of points and you're expected to kind of have that breakout kind of season and it's not really going your way, it's easy to hang your head and kind of mope and pout. But that's not what he did. He was still a tremendous blocker, on the edge for his wide receivers after they caught the ball and during design run plays as well. So I think Tobias Merriweather, as long as he continues to do what he does, his chances will come. And again, I think that it's just going to be dependent on the day.
Nobody wants to hear about Tobias Merriweather being a great blocker. They want to see him catch passes and they want to see him make big plays because that's what he was recruited to do and that's what everyone has in mind. And we all think that he's going to, but you're exactly right. Like I'm not going to sweat it if Tobias didn't have a catch in game one. He did have a couple opportunities to make a catch, didn't come up with it, but I think in the balance, it's all going to work out fine. I think these guys are all going to be making plays throughout the course of the season. It's just 1 out of 12 that we've got to see so far. How about Jordan Botelho? Had a good game himself at defensive end for the Fighting Irish, and of course, he stepped into the spot that was vacated by and I see. Of course, I don't have the Jordan Botelho clip, so we're going to have to skip that. So we will move along because I don't have the Botelho clip here. I apologize for that. But
you're just teasing everyone.
I know. Speaking of quarterbacks, Joseph, thanks for the super chat. Do either of us think Kenny Minchey gets any snaps Saturday? I will say this. I don't think he will get any meaningful snaps if he gets any. I think best case scenario for Kenny Minchey is he gets in maybe the last series of the game and he hands off a couple of times. I literally think that's it. Steve Angeli, if and when the situation presents itself, Steve Angeli will get the more meaningful of the backup quarterback snaps. And if I think Kenny Minchey gets into the game, I don't think he's going to be throwing any passes.
Yeah, I largely agree with what you said. I think, again, it's going to look a lot like Navy last week. I think you'll see Angeli in there towards the end of the third quarter, start of the fourth quarter, hopefully. I think you'll see Steve Angeli be able to run a more open offense. Obviously not the same offense as Sam Hartman, but I think you'll see him get into more – it's just not going to be handing the ball off. I think you'll see a couple passing plays here and there. And I agree with what you said. I think if Steve Angeli's unit puts up a couple, a touchdown or two, and they're still continuing to, as we think they will, be blowing out Tennessee State, I think you'll see Minchey there at the end, maybe the last possession or two. And like you said, it would just be all kind of handoffs by that point and really trying to to kill whatever clock is remaining. But I don't think you'll see any drop back passes out of Kenny Minchey.
Stymie saying Ren and Stimpy on the lookout for the pizza delivery guy. What has got Henry and Scooby so fired up in there?
I don't know, because I don't. When all that action was going on, they were literally fighting each other like 5 feet away from me, and every now and then they get a little too aggressive, and you kind of have to like make sure that one's not like holding the other one by the neck. But I think they're anxious. It's the end of the day. They haven't been outside in a while.
Stimpy. So Notre Dame defensive coordinator Al Golden said this earlier this week when he was asked about Navy showing things offensively that the Irish hadn't seen on film going into the game. Quote, "Oh God, I was a bleep show." How does that sound? I mean, what do you want me to do? I mean, I don't even know what you want me to say. Again, credit to Navy, but it was just, as I said, it was crazy for a really, really long time. New formations, new little trinkets, shifting from unbalanced back to normal, jet motion. They did a great job, end quote. What do you think, Jess?
I think Al Golden gives kind of the honest reaction, and probably the reaction in the moment is, oh crap, like this is already an offense where you have to be disciplined and detail oriented, and then they come out and looks like he said unbalanced. They're using a lot of jet motion, and to really all that is just window dressing. As long as you keep your assignments clean, it's going to be okay. And I think ultimately what happened is, and I think Golden kind of said this in another comment in his press conference, he really relied on the experience and just he called his linebackers problem solvers at one point. And I think that is the biggest thing to take away from this is he's got such a, these Notre Dame linebackers are experienced and they're just old and wise. And when you hear JD Bertrand spent the entire offseason going through different opponents and game planning week by week and, talking to great NFL linebackers, that's the definition of a problem solver. And so the advantage that Al Golden has is when situations like this happen, he's got problem solvers on the field of Kaiser, Leofau, and Bertrand, who are his eyes and ears, and they can diagnose what's going on. They come back to the sideline, and then the group of them get together, and that's really when the problem solving happens. And I just think it's a credit to how good JD Bertrand, Jack Kaiser, and Maris Leofau were in that game, is that they were just problem solvers and they didn't panic when they saw something kind of out of ordinary. And so, yeah, I just think it's great that Al Golden basically has an extension of himself there on the field. Many defensive coordinators kind of ultimately.
He talked when he took the job about the fact that in the NFL, you can't wait until halftime to make some adjustment. You've got to go play to play, series to series. And when you've got veteran guys like he's got out there, starting with JD Bertrand, it gives you that benefit for sure. And I think that he kind of leans on them to an extent, the same way we've talked about Jared Parker being able to lean on Sam Hartman with what Sam Hartman is able to do and quickly diagnose. JD Bertrand, Kaiser, they do that as well. So, but to see them get these look, especially from a triple option with these different formations, different stuff that Navy was showing right away, and to see them be able to, because they gashed them a couple of times right off the bat, 31 total yards on the first 3 plays. And then all of a sudden they're able to adjust really quickly and they're able to shut it down. And Navy only had a couple decent drives the whole rest of the game. So really, really credit to them for being able to recognize, adjust, and do it. And I think you're right. It goes to the quarterbacks that they've got, or the linebackers, but essentially the quarterbacks of the defense that they've got out there. Fill in the blank. It's blank that Ian Book was released this week by the Philadelphia Eagles.
To me, it was disappointing and kind of surprising. I didn't think that Ian Book was a guy who ultimately was gonna challenge anyone for a starting spot. I think he was going to be a solid kind of career type backup guy. But the thing about Ian Book is, where does he really fit in the NFL level? He's not got the big arm and the great passing abilities that like the Patrick Mahomes, Allen has, or going down the list, Trevor Lawrence, got Justin Herbert. He doesn't have the big arm, big passing game ability, and so where he fits in is an offense like the Philadelphia Eagles, someone like Jalen Hurts, where it's not a lot of, the quarterback can rely on his athleticism a little bit more. And I think that's an advantage of Ian Book. And again, it's an offense where you're relying on your wide receivers, and it's a lot of kind of shorter, over the middle, quicker, intermediate routes. It's not your heavy hitting downfield kind of, deep passing plays. And so there's only a few offenses that I think Ian Book truly fits in the NFL. And the Eagles was one of them. And so when you start when you see his being released by a team like the Eagles, it just kind of shrinks his window more and more, because there's a limited amount of teams where Ian Book's skill set ultimately fits, I think, at the end of the day. And that's the bigger issue, is he just doesn't have all the tools of, what it means to be an NFL quarterback ultimately.
And that's why when you look at his prospects going forward, they start to look more not good. All that's because of where now you've been with 2 teams. You've only had one opportunity to show yourself. That was with the Saints in his rookie year. That did not go well. And then Sean Payton decided to step away. And now Sean Payton, of course, is back with the Denver Broncos. So I don't know if maybe that becomes
I can see like the Broncos or a Ravens be like, if he could be like a third string quarterback.
But that's the thing. When you're in his position, you've got to get in there and you've got to kind of show what you can do behind the scenes on that practice squad to give yourself an opportunity to stick around for a couple of years. And then maybe if you're fortunate, you turn into a number 2 type of guy And then if something happens with the starter, you get an opportunity to actually get out there on the field and show that you can get it done. And then when you do that, even if you don't stick with that team, it gives yourself an opportunity to get on with somebody else. But it's going the wrong direction for Ian Book right now. So it's very unfortunate that he wasn't able to at least stick on with the Philadelphia Eagles, because being in that like number 3 scout team quarterbacks are a dime a dozen. Basically, he's got to get on with somebody and open somebody's eyes when he's in there in that building with them, and he's got to do it pretty quickly, or else his career is not going to be much longer. I fear. So, a couple questions popped up. Ty Kroner, interesting question about the 4-2-5 defense Tennessee State runs that we were talking about earlier. And he said, Ohio State runs it as well. How much do you work on 4-2-5 beater plays against Tennessee State, but not show too much for Ohio State?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. Ultimately, is a really good opportunity or scenario for someone like Notre Dame, because of what Ty Kroner just brought up. Is this is a defense that they're going to be playing in a few weeks, and obviously on a much higher stage and a much elevated opponent. So what do? You come out against Tennessee State, and I wouldn't use the word practice, because it's not practice, but I think you run plays to kind of get a feel of how they work against the 4-2-5. You don't show too much. And you determine really kind of what works. And then by the time Ohio State rolls around, you're working on different wrinkles or plays that you showed on film maybe. I think what you're going to establish against Tennessee State is like your base sort of plays of what works well against the 4-2-5. And you'll run some of those more plays against Ohio State, but then you'll start to run, wrinkles or different looks out of those different plays that you didn't show on film that would potentially cause confusion for a team like Ohio State. But I just think it's a really good opportunity to kind of feel out what works against this defense, knowing that you're going against a much bigger opponent in a few weeks that runs the same type of defense.
Yeah, same kind of defense, but the athletes are going to be a lot different. So some of the mismatches that you can get in a game like this are going to look a heck of a lot different when you're talking about an Ohio State versus Tennessee State. There is no line on this game.
I think Vegas. The books are afraid, especially after last week. I just don't think they know what to make of Notre Dame yet.
I know.
Because I think they vastly underrated their offensive production for the season, and then they saw what they did last week. It was like an offensive explosion. I think it really kind of caused them to recalibrate there a little bit. They don't exactly have a feel for what Notre Dame's offense is going to be.
What kind of line would you give this game, Notre Dame, Tennessee State?
So remind me, was Navy 28.5?
No, it was 20.5.
Oh, it was 20.5.
20.5.
I think that's where I would take the Tennessee State game. I would take it to like 28.5. I would take it to around the 30-point range.
I would give it like 40-45.
Oof, right? That's a huge 40. Spread.
Well, it's Notre Dame versus an FCS school that is not good. I mean, look at the numbers that Chi-Town is pointing out. Their offense rating in the subdivision, abysmal. They're 800 plus in offensive rating. Their quarterback had more than 300 negative rushing yards last year. He had like 96 rushing attempts, and I think he ended up with like 60-some total rushing yards last year because he was sacked 35 times. He only threw 8 touchdown passes, only threw 4. So, like, if Navy is 20.5, I would at least double it. I would make it my
so you're giving line. It like 2 more touchdowns. I think you're what, at like 34.5 then?
No, I'm 40.5. I'm dead serious. I mean, you've seen 40.5 point lines and 45 point plus lines. With
usually when Alabama plays an FCS opponent.
Yeah. Ty says 42.5. I think that's a good line right there. I would take that one. I would take 42.5. I can't believe you're only saying 4 touchdowns in this game, because I don't think Tennessee State's going to find the end zone in this game.
I just don't know when Notre Dame's going to take their foot off the gas ultimately.
That's true. That's true. What about an over-under overall point total on this game? Where are you going? Chi-Town actually was thinking along with this. I started this earlier. He said over under 60 points.
I think that's where I was thinking 59.5. And I'm not just saying that. Like, I was right before you pulled this up, I was right around the 59.5 area.
Yeah. I think so as well. And like I might actually set it a little bit lower because of what you said. Notre Dame is just blowing the doors off these guys. How much do they downshift and just try to get this game over with and not completely embarrass them out there? Like how much
I
of that
think
will come
Stymie
into
brings up a good point. If the line is 42.5, that means the over-under should be 42.5.
That's fair too, and that's why I'm saying it needs to be higher. That's why I had it up around 50 because look, Notre Dame just scored 42 points against Navy, barely breaking a sweat, and 45 total points were scored in that game. I think almost all the scoring is going to be done by Notre Dame. I think I'm going back up again. I'm putting it at like 50 and a half. I'm going 50 and a half, and it's all going to be Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And that's probably fair. The over-under should also be the same.
I can't give my game prediction because we're saving that, but
Okay.
I do think a burger is going to be involved in this game.
Okay. Chad said he just got his ticket for Ohio State at Notre Dame. Looking forward to it. Was at the Clemson Notre Dame game last year. Hope it's as awesome for our Irish as that one. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Josh is predicting 52-3. Tommy is saying the over under 49.7. Okay. Because we're doing tenths of points now, I guess. So I don't know. I think one team's going to score a lot, and the other team is going to score next to nothing. So I do have Tennessee State scoring some points, but not much. All right, well, that's going to do it for tonight. Don't forget, we've got IB Countdown coming up this weekend. Countdown to kickoff. So we've got that coming up for you. And of course, we've got the game coming up Saturday in the post-game show afterwards.
Ooh.
Putting in work 62-6. I would not be shocked if it is right around that number. I would not be shocked at all. John saying 56-0 Notre Dame. I think they're breaking 50. I'm not
wanted to give a shout out to the 615 random goat, the Middle Tennessee, or sorry, the Tennessee State fan that jumped into the chat. Said he'll just be happy if TSU gets in the end zone.
Oh, I
just want our boys to keep fighting. This is awesome to be able to play a school like Notre Dame. I think that's a really awesome comment, and I think that's, you know, again, it's you don't just show up to a school and you know, just be excited for the opportunity. Obviously, you're playing to win, but I think that's a lot of sentiment that's going to come out of this weekend for a lot of, you know, Tennessee State fans, players, coaches, and stuff. I just think it's a good opportunity for both teams, no matter kind of what happens on the scoreboard.
Irish Chi-Town says he heard Henry predicted 77-0. Henry is being very mute right now. So
yeah, last time I heard he was thinking like 62-3, but
yeah,
you know, that was last time we checked in.
All right, well, we'll wrap it up with that. Hit the like button on your way out. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the game. And again, of course, don't forget, countdown to kickoff. The pods will drop Saturday morning, so we will be talking to you then. Hit the like button, subscribe, rate, and review. We'll talk to you later. IB Nation Sports Talk.